Hello everyone, welcome to the 6th iOS tutorial. In this tutorial, I will talk about the console and how we can send message to console via NSLog. And also I will show you how we can see the documentations for each class or each method. And in this tutorial, I will spend a lot of time for NSString, which is one of the foundation frameworks in Objective-C, and introduce some of useful methods like string by appending string and also string by appending format. So let's move on. Okay, let's talk about the console and how we can launch the console. If you remember from tutorial number 3, there's a button over here in the middle, and if you click on it, it will show and hide the console. The console is here in the white blank space because we don't have any message to send right now, but we can see whatever variable or whatever message that we have on the console. In order to send a message to the console, I have to add a code to the view lifecycle. I will dedicate one big tutorial for a lifecycle, but just right now, don't focus on the method that I'm writing. Just focus on the console. I will add this method, which is for the lifecycle. Just see this method. Don't worry about it. I will describe it in a separate session. What is this and what does it do? And view did load. So I will briefly describe this method just in case if it bothers you. It just says when the view loads, just do this, and you can add whatever the function you have here. And we'll execute it when the view loads. So right now we want to send a message to the console. In order to send a message, we have to use a function called NSLog. And as you can see, when I created this format, it will say, okay, I need the NSString. So in order to have the NSString, usually if you come from Java, you'll have double quotation, but in Objective-C you have to put the @ sign at the beginning, and then it'll know that this is a string. Then I would say, okay, this is what I want to send to the console is, you put it here. For example, I want to say hello console, and then it gives me the error because first of all for the semicolon, and then here you have to put the type of the things that you want to add it to the console. For example, if it's the float, you will put F. If it's, you will put D. But since it's the string, you'll put @ sign, which is here. And then if I run the program from this here, from play button here, it will show me the console. See? Hello console. So we sent the message to the console by this line of code. Remember, as I said, this is the view lifecycle, and I will talk about this function later, but all I want you to know is just NSLog and what is it doing. One more time, in order to show this is the string, we should put %@ sign in order to define, for example, digit or integer. You would say, for example, this is D or G. Sometime there's documentation for that. I'll later on talk about it. But right now, since we have the string, we would say @ sign, %@ sign, and it will execute this, and this is our string right now. And if you have another string, we would say, okay, %@ sign, %@ sign, and we would put another comma and create another string. Let's say hello console, how are you, and then execute it. And it would say exactly like this: hello console, how are you? Now let's send message via properties. Let's define a property here. As I showed you how to create a property, you say that sign property, non-atomic, strong, then the type, which is NSString star, and our property name, which I would say st1. Okay, and then I would come here, and inside of the implementation I would synthesize it and say st1 equals underscore st1. Okay, so far I just showed how to define a property. Now I want to show you how to use and how to get the value of the property or set value. In order to get or set, if it's for example, if I need this variable st1, I have to say at first self. Self is like if you're coming from Java, it's like this: self, then dot, and then the name of the variable st1. And then, as I mentioned, in order to have the string, we'd say @ and then a string 1 semicolon. So this is how I set this property to have this value. This is the value of this string. And this is how I set this st1 property. So right now this self.st1 is string 1. The value of this is string 1. And if I want to log this, I would come here and just remove one of this because I just want to have one, and then say instead of this I would say self.st1. And now I can log this. If I run it via this button, I can see string 1. As you can see, we set this variable, we set self.st1 to have this value. In order to get something, it should be on the right side of the equation. Right now it's on the left side, so we are setting this variable. If we want to get the value, it should be on the right hand side of the equation. Let's have an example, it will make more sense. We have a property, I want to define it, non-atomic, and then it's strong, and NSString. This one I would say is st2. And then I have to synthesize it, synthesize st2 equals to underscore st2. Now I want to get the value of st1 and put it for st2. So I would say self.st2 equals to self.st1. So what it means is that I want to get the value of st1 and put it for string number 2, st2. So if I log st2, I should have the same thing that I have here, because what I did is just add these two properties equal to each other. So if I run the program, it should be a string 1, because these two properties have the same value. One thing that I forgot to mention was adding comments to the code. For example, if I want to have some explanation for this string or this method, I would say here t1 is for log This is explanation. Compiler will not compile this line as soon as it see // here. And this is just good for the developers and the people who will see the code and they just have get some idea what's going on in your code. And if you have multiple lines of comments, you would add one slash and then one star, and then to close it you put another star and then close the slash. So then whatever you put inside of this, for example, you say this is my first comment, and for example the date right now it's 8 or 2/8/2014. Yes, this is for multiple lines. So we need these comments a lot of times, so that's why I just wanted to mention. Another thing that I think it would be helpful to know is how to see the documentation for each class. For example, we have NSString class and I want to see the documentation for this class. What I should do is hold the Alt or Option key on my keyboard, and as you can see the cursor would look like the question mark, and then if I click on it, it will bring up the view description of this class and also the reference. If I click on the reference, it will bring up the documentation for this class, which is NSString. And I can see all of the available methods for this class. And you can see there are tons of useful methods that you can find here that could save a lot of time for you to write a code. So before doing something by yourself, you have to make sure that you check this documentation to see if there is available method that you can use. I wouldn't suggest to read all of that. I just said that it is good to just schemely go through it and know that these methods are available. So let's go to our code and continue. Okay, the last but not the least subject that I want to talk about is some useful methods in NSString class. For example, if I put actually set the string to for this for st2 and then I want to have another string which has this format, which I want to append these two strings together. For example, attach string 1 to string 2, and I want to have something like this: string 1 and then string 2. What should I do? What should I do to have something like this and then log it? Right now I don't have any method, but if I can use some NSString method to do this for me. So at first I have to create a property to add this string together and put it to the log. So we define a new property, non-atomic, strong, which is type of NSString, string, and we call it st1, st3. And then we have to synthesize it. At synthesize st3 equals to st3 and semicolon. And then the way, as I said, the way that we can access to this property is to put self then st3. Now we access to this property. Now we want to say, okay, I want this property to have something like this. It means that appending these two strings together. So there is a method, and the way that we append, we send, in order to send a message to an object, we have to put this sign, which is bracket. We open the bracket and we say, okay, I want to append st1, and then the function name is string by appending string, and then the second string, which is self.st2. So let's review this again. I said I want to set the value for st3 to be st1 append by st2. So this is kind of like reading English in a really nice format. This is the way that Objective-C is designed, that you can feel that you're reading in English. So I set this variable, this property, to have something like this. And the way that we send message to object is by adding them inside of the bracket. So as you can see, I said I want to send a message to this object by this bracket. So I said self.st1, I want to add this value append by this value, self.st2. And then I want to log st3. So instead of st2, we log st3. So let's see what would we get. If we run it, we see string 1 and it appends to string 2, so we don't have any space between it, and it's string 2. So we append these two properties. Now let's talk about the second method that I want to talk here. Let's get rid of this method. And this method, for example, if I want to have a format for the string that I want to log, something like open parentheses, close parentheses around the st1 value, and then 2 stars in the beginning and 2 stars at the end, or whatever format that you want. Or for example, you want to add this and something like this. What if I want to do something like this? So there's a method to do the format, and let's have our second string, which is st3, and how we can define. As I said, in order to send a message to object, you have to open bracket, and we want to send a message to st3. We want to say, okay, you have to have this format. So we copy this, self.st3, and then we send the message to this object, and we say, okay, string by appending format. And what is the format that we want to have? As I said, NSString always starts from with @ and then a string, and we have to put our format here. First of all, how many variables that we want to use? There are 2 variables, so we have to put 2 %@. And then we just put this %@, and then again %@. And what is the format that I want? I said for the first %@, I want to have open and close parentheses around it. And then I want to have 2 stars at the beginning and 2 stars at the end. And in between, I want to have dash and less than. So this is how we define a format, but we have to define, say, for example, this is the first, second properties. So what we should, in the second argument, is we have to say, what is this? This is self.st1, which is here. And then in the second argument would be self.st2 and close the bracket. So we would say this self.st1 would be this, and self.st2 would be this. And then we should log it. Should log self.st3. And let's see what would we get. And we'll get null. Why is it null? Because we haven't initialized st3, and it is nil now, or null. In Objective-C we call it nil. And sending message to a nil object in Objective-C doesn't throw an exception. It just does nothing. So it's not good for do nothing. We're not programming for doing nothing. So we have to initialize the self.st3, And the way that I initialize, I would say it's an empty string. This is an empty string. And now if I log it, play the program again, it would have my format. It would be string 1 and the format that I create, and then string 2. So this is the useful format, useful function in NSString. Okay, we covered a lot in this tutorial. I suggest watch this tutorial more than one time because we have some fundamental things in this tutorial, like this funky format, which is open and close bracket, which I said this is for sending message to objects and getting results. You will get used to it. We will use it a lot in future tutorials, so don't get worried about getting too complicated. Just copy the project from the link that is in the description of this video, and you can play around and, for example, change the format, and you get the different result. For example, if I want to change, have double parentheses and I log it, I would have double parentheses at the beginning. So follow us on the next tutorial. Have a good day.